it's a good book to have in our Bible. It teaches us some things that we wouldn't know anywhere else from any other book in the Bible. And so God had a plan for us, and He included that for us. So we're thankful for it. Trust that we've given at least a fair effort to try to glean some good truths from it, and give a proper understanding of it. We're going to begin with a prayer. If you bow your heads, please. Holy Father, Thou art so good and gracious and kind unto us, the Almighty God, the one in whom we believe, walk, live, have our being. You have looked down upon us, and You're gracious in so many ways, down through the years, yea, centuries now. And we pray unto Thee, God, with boldness, as You've encouraged us to do, that You would continue to be with us and strengthen us in Your faith. Lead us, guide us, and direct us as You would do so through Your word, and have our hearts be open, receptive to Your truths, and may our courage be strong, and our faith be pure in all that we do and say in Your word. Bless us tonight, O God, as we have assembled here as Your children to study Your word, to learn Your ways. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay. The Song of Solomon, love song, love poem. It is a poem, Oriental poem, by the way. Some people try to emphasize that and say, well, why do you want to call it an Oriental poem? Well, I guess it's because of the general area from which it came. The nature of poetic literature, we are told by those who supposedly know that Oriental poems, and one characteristic of them, which is supposedly expressed in the Book of Solomon, is that it is not nearly as bashful in expressing the anatomy sometimes of the human body. And so we have some very beautiful expressions really between a husband and wife, a man and a woman who are to become and do become husband and wife in the book of the Song of Solomon. And so we're grateful for the great lessons that we learn about those great truths about it. And nowhere quoted in the New Testament. So there's nowhere you can go to the New Testament and say, well, this quote comes out of the book of the Song of Solomon, because there's just no case there it will. I would suggest that we try to remember three main divisions of the book, and this will help us, I think, in our general overview of it and understanding of it in the process. There's the first section of the book, which goes up to the early part of chapter 3, which talks about before the marriage. We're talking about a relationship between a man and a woman, between the book of the Song of Solomon. The man is Solomon. We identify him as such. He is so identified in the book. And the woman is called a Shunammite woman. They're called Shunem. Some were told 50 miles or more above or north of Jerusalem. And she was a country girl. She was raised up in the country by her mother, raised up well. A very beautiful lady, very hard-working lady, if you will. She knew how to take care of sheep. She knew how to, trim the vineyards and take care of those things. She was just a good country girl, as we might say in our day and age, but a very beautiful one, and one that caught Solomon's eye in no uncertain degrees at all. Very overcome by her presence, if you will, in the process. So there was that period before the marriage, and then there's a section of the book beginning about the early part of chapter 3 on up in the beginning of chapter 5 of the marriage, the wedding, the things which took place up to the time of the marriage as such. And then in the latter part of the book, where we are continuing tonight, has to do is after the marriage, the events which take place after that in the process. Another rather unusual characteristic of the book, we're told, and I think it bears out pretty much so, that the book is unique in the fact that it is made up basically totally of a series of speeches, monologues, not dialogues, but monologues. What's the difference between a monologue and a dialogue? Because there's a monologue, you got one person talking. Dialogue, you have someone else entering into the conversation with you in the process. So that's another sort of unusual thing of it. So you might keep those things in mind in the process. We learned back in the early part of the book how the bride has expressed her love for whatever will be her spouse in the process. Had a description of the bride in the early part of the book, chapter 1. We have a description of the bridegroom given in chapter 2. Bride has sort of a dream in chapter 3. It mentions the absence of the bridegroom, if you will, and talks about the love for the bride. Chapter 4 has really a beautiful chapter because the entirety of that chapter has to do with words, elements which extol really the bride. It talks about her person, it talks about her accomplishments. She just couldn't be more perfect than what she is. That's what Solomon wants everyone to know and to understand, I think, in the process. In chapter 5, the bridegroom is out. The wife is at home, apparently already gone to bed. He comes, knocks on the door. She doesn't get up in time to let him in, and so when she finally gets the door, he's gone, and she goes out into the streets to search for him and hunt for him, and ends up getting beaten by the watchman of the town. Someone said, why in the world would they beat up this woman? It's out late at night in the process. Ordinarily, we aren't told specifically in the text why she was beaten up. We might guess a little bit on it. What would you guess as a probability or a likelihood, or at least a suspectability, if anything? What kind of person would ordinarily be out at that time of night?
Probably someone up to no good.
Probably so, I think, Brother Twishman. So, in other words, the watchman of the city certainly deemed it rather quickly that she had no business being out there, and she seemed to suffer a little bit physically because of that in the process there. And so that was not a very pleasant event in her life. And she inquires of those who we learn sometimes called the daughters of Jerusalem. We identify these as her maidens, those who were apparently attendants of hers in the process, and she inquires of them about it, and they raise a question, just what makes him so special over anybody else. Turn to chapter 5, if you will, as we get on into chapter 6. Verse 9, they say this, what is thy beloved more than another beloved? O thou fairest among women, what is thy beloved more than another beloved? That thou dost so charge us in the process. And she charged them back in verse 8 there, that if you find my beloved, that you tell him I am sick of love, or I'm deeply love sick, I guess is the way we would try to express it in our common vernacular in our day and age. And so they say, what is so special about this fellow that you love so much in the process? And then she proceeds to give a description of Solomon. And again, going back to the nature of language in the days of old, we are told it's not unusual at all to find in ancient poetry descriptions of the ladies and their various, aspects of their beauty and aspects of it, but to find one of the man is not so common at all. Here we have one of Solomon in chapter 5. He's white and ruddy. Someone told me last week what that meant. Someone tell me again if you don't mind. Ruddy? That means he's in a boat and he had kept the rudder going there a bunch. Probably meant either reddish. Some people think it means short or stocky, something like that. I don't think that probably would not depict Solomon very well in his life as such. And there anyway, of a fair complexion and appreciative as such, chiefest among 10,000. Head like fine gold, locks his hair like bushy, black as a raven, eyes as eyes of doves, by the rivers of waters, washed with milk, fit setly, had good eyes. Eyes are important. And you tell a lot about people's eyes, don't you? You go to the doctor's eyes, the doctor, they won't look at your eyes and down your throat, don't they? So they can tell a lot about you by doing that. Well, our appearance, eyes. You can look at someone and say, you're not feeling well, are you? How do you know? You just don't look like you're feeling well. And that appearance usually shows up in our eyes and things of that nature. Cheeks as a bed of spices, sweet flowers, and lips are like lilies, dropping sweet smelling myrrh. Well, he did have a way with words. You'll have to give him credit for that now. After all, he wrote how many Psalms? How many?
1,005.
1,005. How many Proverbs? 3,000. Yeah, I think so. 1 Kings 4, verse 32. I might go back and check that. Hands are as gold rings set with beryl. His belly is bright ivory laid over sapphires. And so he was well, he's in good shape. Legs are like pillars of marble set up on sockets of fine gold. Countenance is as Lebanon. Excellent as cedars. Countenance. Tell me about countenance. What is that? What is our countenance?
Face.
Do what, brother?
Face.
F.A. It's how we present ourselves, basically, is it not? And the fellow says, if a fellow's down and out, he's down and out. If a fellow's not down and out, if he's up and at him, he's up and at him. His countenance, attitude, recognizably so. Recognizably attitude, it seemed to be the idea. Here's a man whose countenance was good. It's good, in fact, it's described as, as excellent as a cedar's. The left cedar's left. The fellow says, you're standing about as tall as you can get when you compare to that, aren't you, Brother Richard? That's what it is. Mouth is most sweet, yet it is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, she says. This is my friend. I like that in verse 16. Not only is he her beloved, but he is her friend. Wonderful thing between a man and a woman, the relationship that they have in the marital union. And so, but when that marital union also includes a wonderful friendship, then the fellow says, you talk about icing on the cake. It really is. Makes life good. Old daughters. So come to chapter 6. I think we ended up down about verse 3 last Monday evening, Lord willing, if I remember halfway decently, halfway correctly about the process there. And so she begins out in chapter 6. The companions of the bride, they inquire after the bridegroom, whither is thy beloved gone? Seems to be the companions speaking here. And though fairest among women, they're speaking to, of course, the Shunammite woman, that we may seek him with thee. We'll go help you find him, seems to be the idea. And she says this response, my beloved has gone down into his garden. His garden. To the beds of spices, to feed in the gardens, and to gather lilies. And when he talks about going down into his garden, we're going to find out basically what, generally speaking, what does that have, general application to, you think? Solomon have a lot of gardens, literally speaking? Yeah. Do you have another garden that's sort of special? Yeah, that's his Shunammite one. Most likely that's what he's having reference to here in the process. And so probably just identified herself as the garden here in the process. And here we mentioned last week, if I recall correctly, as we ended our class, she said, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feedeth among the lilies. Now remember, this is country folks. Most of the activities that we find in the Song of Solomon are activities which take place out in the country. Now there are some instances where we are in Jerusalem, but generally speaking, we're talking about events which take place in the country as such. Beautiful country land, to be out among in the country. Some of you have experienced that, I know. If you haven't experienced that, well, heaven awaits you. That's the next thing to it, I guess. So just stay faithful. So, beautiful thing there across it. I am mine and he is mine. I'm his and he is mine. That's the way it is. In the relationship, in the marriage union, that is, you have two people, you have the man and you have the woman. She belongs to her, him, and he belongs to her. Paul spoke of that somewhat in the book of 1 Corinthians, in an idea too. That we belong to each other and to who else? God, together. Other than that, as far as other people are concerned, it doesn't mean we don't have other associations, other friends, other relationships. We're brothers and sisters in Christ, but that special marital relationship is a relationship between the man and the woman, the husband and the wife, and the life, and it's such a beautiful thing to even think about, if you will, in the process. And so we have another description of the bride here. Another one. Had one back in chapter 1. We had some more in chapter 4. And here we have some more. In fact, on through the end of this book, we're basically given to the idea of those things which center upon the bride, the wife here. Here's what it says. Thou art beautiful, O my love. Beautiful as what? Israel. Now, like we said, Solomon has a way with words. So already said she's as pretty as a horse, hasn't she? Has hair like a goat. Now she's as beautiful as Tisra. Well, that must mean something. Well, let's talk about that. Well, tell me about Tisra. Comely as Jerusalem, there's another aspect of a similar nature to it. Areas noted for beauty, they're ancient. In fact, Tisra was noted as a particular place, we're told, in the northern kingdom for its beauty. And old Jeroboam #1, that's where he set up his capital when he became the king over that, before Samaria became the center point there. It's a very noted place in the land, if you will, there, that day and age. And he goes on with the idea, talks about her eyes again, as he already has back over in chapter 4. And he says they just overcome me. I mean, Solomon says, you know, I got there in your eyes. That fellow didn't have a chance, did he? He was taken over altogether. Hair, again, as he's already said before, like a flock of goats that appear from Gilead. Again, his teeth are like a flock of sheep. That means they're white, those who go up and washing there. And there's not one barren among them, which means what? She don't have any missing, does she? They're all there. They're all there. And there. As a piece of pomegranate are thy temples, which has to probably do with the nature of the color of it, perhaps the light of the color part of it. And then look at verse 8. Here's an interesting verse. 60. There are 60 queens, 80 concubines, virgins without number. That tells us something, we think, relative to the general time that Solomon's writing this book. Solomon, by the time he got to the end of the road, how many queens and concubines did he have? 700 wives and 300. Put them all together, had 1,000, didn't he? I don't know if that'd just be just 1,000, not 1,001, but you know, he had that indication here, since there's only 60, most likely that would indicate what relative to the time of the writing of the book.
Very early in his
It would be earlier in his reign, wouldn't it? I like what the next verse says about Solomon's attitude toward one. He says, my dove, my undefiled is but one. She is the only one of her mother. Now we're going to read in chapter 8 where she's got a little sister. But as far as Solomon's concerned, she's the one and only. She is the choice of her that bare her. The daughters saw her and blessed her, and yea, and the queens and the concubines, and they praised her. So here is the Shulamite woman. Solomon looks at her. He gives his beautiful picture of a descriptive picture of her, and says of all the queens that he has, which means, I suppose, others who means be wives and such, he says there's really how many to him? Just one. So I don't know that I can explain why Solomon had 700 wives and such. I don't know that he was given just the fact to see how many he could have. I don't know whether it had to do with politics, and the nature of kings, and having harems and things. I don't know all that. Anybody can give an answer to that? But it does seem that here at this particular point in time of his life, his life seemed to be directed toward whom? This one queen as such. One queen as such. And as such. And wonderful concept that he has about. What about the others? It says, the choice over all the back. He says the daughters saw her and blessed her. Who else saw her and blessed her and pronounced her as being?
The queens.
Yeah, the sister queens, we might say. And maidens even of course, the Shulamite woman, that she was worthily and was so appropriately addressed and recognized as such. And that, so we come to verse 10 in chapter 6 there, and talks about who is she that looketh forth as the morning. This too, I think, is descriptive of the Shulamite woman. Fair as the moon, clear as the sun, and terrible as an army with banners. Well, that's quite a description, isn't it? Here's a Shulamite woman. She's fair as the sun, and she's as impressive as the moon there. And she says here, she's, what else she does like? As terrible as an army with banners. Ooh-wee.
She's a force to be reckoned with.
A force to be reckoned with. I like that, Lauren. I think that's a good way of putting it. She was a force to be reckoned with. And she was well documented, we might say, in the process. And there she's compared to the splendor of the sun and moon. And there's some notes, various ideas are offered about this idea of the force of the armies there in the process. I'd make a suggestion on your handout that I have there. And a lot of people have different ones who are doing the speaking here as such. And we just kind of try to keep it as simple as we can. And verse 11, he talks about he went down to the garden. As he goes on, let's go on a little bit more on that process. And she is as forceful, she's, as Lauren said, a woman to be reckoned with. She is, she's just something else, and Solomon recognizes her. Verse 11, he says, I went down into the gardens, nuts, to see the fruits of the valley, and to see whether the vine flourisheth, and the pomegranates budded. Or ever I was aware, my soul made me like the chariots of Amminadab. And a lot of ideas about this particular idea. And we suggest that Solomon is speaking in a way to reflect upon his being overcome by his bride, and the one who is now his wife, and the fact that he's overcome and he's just overwhelmed with her beauty and with her person and with her excellence. And back earlier he said, you know, she didn't have any flaws. She was just perfect in the process. And a lot has to do with, we're told about this idea of the chariots of Amminadab, the chariots of Amminadab. And we suggest this in your notes there, that some think references to Israel, but I wouldn't put too much on that. Others think to an individual, and I make a suggestion, if our thoughts above on verses 11 and 12 are correct in the process, and this would probably be simply a way of a proverbial statement describing the swiftness of Solomon's falling in love with a Shulamite woman as such. The chariots of Amminadab. So we don't know who Amminadab was. We don't know if that was an individual or a place or that. And so seems to be have something to do with the swift. Just a thought. You can take it and read it, and read some more upon it. And let's go on to verse 13. It's another interesting verse where he says, Return, return, O Shulamite, return, return, that we may look upon thee. What will you see in the Shulamite? As it were, the company of two armies as such. And so look upon her beauty is going to be seen by all, as it were the company of two armies as such. And I think we have in the American Standard translation, as upon the dance of Mahanaim, where you have the idea, as it were the company of two armies. And again, it's one of those expressions that a lot of thoughts and suggestions and ideas are expressed about it in the process. And so she's looked upon, if you look at the idea of the American Standard expression, she's looked upon as those that look upon the dance of Mahanaim. Now, Mahanaim was a place on the east side of the Jordan River. I believe it was a fellow by the name of David who ended up over there one time when he was fleeing from his son, was he not, Absalom? And evidently there was some recognized there as one of which the inhabitants of Mahanaim, this dance, you know, excelled, or one of which someone says for the pulpit commentary, which the aims of the host were thought to engage. And again, I would make a suggestion in the last paragraph under B there on your notes. Why could the expression not simply be a figurative enhancement of her present, being impossible to ignore, and the amazement of her presence or beauty be comparable to two armies approaching? Contextually, it would seem to me that that would be a reasonable thought on that verse. What does that say about the presence of the Shulamite woman, wife? She, fellow said, she just didn't go by unnoticed, did she, Brother Keith? She didn't go by unnoticed. And Solomon, you talk about a fellow being overcome and taken by someone, he was overcome and taken altogether by this lovely, lovely woman. Beautiful woman. Always spoken of and exalted to the highest degree in the words of Solomon, her bridegroom, and recognized by those round about her also of being of excellent quality and character and everything else. So let's go on down to chapter 7 here, where we have a further description of the bride. And this goes from foot to head, someone may notice of the process there. Feet. How beautiful are thy feet with shoes. You suppose that this gal being a country girl ever run around any barefooted? I suspect she probably did. But she dressed up rather well, didn't she? So she put on shoes, old prince's daughter. So here was a farm girl now, she is the daughter of a prince. she has been elevated in the cultural environment in which she lived. And talks about the joints of thy thighs. Someone says, that's awfully, close there. And are like jewels, the work of thy hands of the cunning workman. And so, is it an inappropriate thing? I'm going to get myself in trouble here for sure. Is it an appropriate thing for someone to notice and have appreciation for the physical, shall we say, the physical makeup of their wife or mate? Now, someone said that when you get around looking at somebody else's wife, that may be a different course or a different subject. But Solomon, he didn't miss a thing, did he? I mean, he took it off. And navel, like a round goblet, if you will, navel, pleasant to the eye. And what about the belly, like a heap of wheat set about with it? I don't know about this fellow. We seem to have a way with words, Sometimes if some of us try to use some of those words today in our day and age, we probably get in what? Trouble. Two breasts are like two young roes that are twins. Neck, like a tower of ivory. Eyes, like the fish pools of Heshbon. It's not the first time we read that. By the gate of Bath-rabbim, thy nose is as the tower of Lebanon, which looketh toward Damascus. Eyes, nose, and Phyllis says, those are those things that every part of the body is an important part. Head upon thee is like Carmel. Now, tell me about Carmel. What's Carmel? It's a mountain, isn't it? Not only just a mountain, it's we call it a promontory. It's a mountain that juts out into the Mediterranean Sea. So it's sort of a prominent point. If you're going up the coast of the Mediterranean Sea up there, you come up to Mount Carmel, you come around Mount Carmel there, going up the coastline in the process. Head is like milk, hair of thine is purple. The idea of purple, probably someone suggested some shellfish in that area was special to be able to provide that sort of coloring thing, and ornamented, that sort of thing. And have y'all seen any ladies around our day and age with purple hair? Yeah. So they're not new. It's not new. And, but it's something to try to enhance the attractiveness of the subject. And so it says in 6, how fair and how pleasant art thou, O love, for delights. This thy stature. Tell me about the palm tree. It's like a palm tree. Thy breast it clusters of grapes. And then he said in verse 8, I'll go up to the palm tree. Take hold of the boughs thereof. And also thy breast shall be as clusters of the vine, and the smell of thy nose like apples, it says. Palm tree, tell me about the palm tree. What kind of tree is that? It's a stately tree. Usually stands, noticeably, pretty erect and recognizable as such. And so, have to do perhaps of her stature and the concept there and her general. But talk about the roof of her mouth like wine. Some think that might have to do with words which could come forth from as such. I wouldn't be dogmatic about that, but goeth down sweetly and like the best wine, they're pleasant. And you can take the most beautiful, attractive, physically proportioned, ideal woman that you can think, and then let her stand up and open her mouth, and if what comes out of her mouth is less than it ought to be, what does that do to her beauty? Yeah, what it does. And so, what those things, those are important parts also in the process. Lips like those that are asleep, causing the lips of those that are asleep to speak. And some people think that has the idea that we would even dream about, but we'll talk about them in our sleep as such. So come to chapter 7 and verse 10. Back in verse 8 and 9, Verse 8, Solomon says this, says, I'll go up to the palm tree, take hold of the boughs, and therefore. Verse 10 is really the Shulamite's response to verses 8 and 9. Here's how she responds to it. He says, I am my beloved's, and his desire is what?
Towards me.
For me. And so she recognized that. And so her response is, come, my beloved, let us go forth in the field, let us lodge in the vintages, let us get up early to the vineyards, let us see in the vine, if the vine flourishes, whether the tender grapes appear, and the pomegranates bud forth, there will I give my loves to give thee my loves. In other words, let us get up and go about one with another to various places which are round about, and we'll share our loves one with another. Talks about something in verse 13 called a mandrake, and if you have any questions there, you might, that's the word that you fill in there. Give a smell, and in our gates are all manner of pleasant fruits, and you know, which I've laid up for thee, O my beloved. So she had laid up, she had made preparation, seems to be the idea. And so here's the concept of the reunion, of the relationship which go forth, and they're enjoying the great and wonderful relationship of being husband and wife in the land in which they live. And fella says life just can't get much better than what it is that they're talking about right there. They're together, they're one, they're enjoying one another, and they're enjoying the land in which they live. And fella says it's just a wonderful, beautiful relationship. What does that teach us, if anything, about our relationships in this day and age? That we'll never have any issues or problems? Doesn't teach us that, does it? But it does teach us, you know, if we have a proper respect and appreciation for each other as husband and as wife, and the union that we have together is a great and wonderful union as such, and can be and should be enjoyed to the very fullest as such. Chapter 8 is kind of a good way, I think, to bring this poem, song of songs, best of all songs, as some people say. And so here she goes on in first several verses of chapter 8. She openly avows her love. Here she says to her bridegroom, to Solomon, oh, that thou wert as my what?
Brother.
Brother. Wow. Sucked the breast of my mother, maybe she did. And when I should find thee without, I would kiss thee, I would not be despised. Why in the world would she desire him to be her brother? You know, already, you know, she says my spouse, my sister, for the earlier book had that in terminology. Her brother. And let's read on just a little bit more, then come back and comment a bit on it. I would lead thee and bring thee into my mother's house. Who would instruct me? I would cause thee to drink of spiced wine of the juice of my pomegranate. His left hand should be under my head, and his right hand should embrace me. The idea seems to be, and is suggested by most to be, that if he were as her brother, number one, that would mean she would have enjoyed, I suppose, this union or this tie with him from early on in life as such. But as the context here, you know, she would be able to, if you're out with a brother, if you kiss your brother, the brother kiss your sister, anybody thought about that? No. I said that's not unusual. But if you're out with someone else, and if you're kissing someone who's not your brother or not your sister, then that at least used to be frowned upon as being an inappropriate conduct in the process. And so she says, I'll display mine. Where did this Shulamite woman learn her skills, her qualities?
Her mother.
From her mother. Thanks be to God for good mamas who teach their daughters how to be wives, how to love husbands. The husbands need to be taught the same thing on the other side of the fence process. And so some think that the idea, by the way, that I would cause thee to drink a spiced wine of the juice of my pomegranate goes back to the practice of when, you know, when two people get married and such, they have something that they drink, interchange arms and have something, you know, some kind of drink like that to share. I don't know if that's the source of that or not, but just a thought. So she gives charge again in verse 4 to the daughters of Jerusalem. Same charge she's given two previously time in the book, that you stir not up nor wake my love until he please. And so if he's there, if he's asleep, so don't bother him, so let him sleep. So come on down to about verse 5 now, in chapter 8. And question, someone's coming. Someone's leaning upon someone. And some people say, you know, this verse is sort of difficult. Well, that's not the first one we've encountered in Song of Solomon's that way. Who is this that cometh up from the wilderness, leaning upon her beloved? And so we would think that answer to that question would be who? The Shunammite. How's she coming up in the wilderness? I don't know. It may be the fact that they were traveling that way. It wouldn't be an unusual thing, perhaps, for her to be recognized as one leaning upon her. And then there's the second part of it says, I raised thee up under the apple tree. There thy mother brought thee forth. There she brought thee forth that bare thee. And the question is raised, who is talking there? And your answer is? That's what all other people say. Not too much about it. Let me just offer a thought about it as such. And number one, as has been the case down through chapter 6 and 7 on into chapter 8, the Shunammite woman is the one who's the center, really the center of attention down through here. And it raises a question directed again to her, who's coming up, leaning upon her beloved there. And then perhaps, I would suggest that perhaps Solomon, when he says, I raised her up under the apple tree, which would perhaps have to do with the idea of her embrace, maybe perhaps somewhat like described back up in verse 3. There my mother brought thee forth, thy mother brought thee forth. And so, talking about the place of her birth, and she that brought thee forth that bare thee. And so, here up in the land of Shunem is where that took place. It's just a thought on that. Verses 6 and 7, she wants to be something special. She already is something special. She wants it identified. She wants to be set as what upon his heart?
Seal.
A seal. Setting as a seal upon thine heart. And a seal upon thine arm, and a seal upon thine arm, a seal upon thine heart, and a seal upon thine heart. And then she's going to give an expression for talking about love. She talks about love is strong as death, jealousy is cruel as the grave, and coals that are thereof are coals of fire, which hath the most vehement flame. Interesting expressions there. What about the idea of seal? What's the seal does?
Identification and
The what?
associated, being an identification or showing who you are.
Yeah. It identifies or doesn't. Yeah. We have some things now, we usually put them where, as such, and there. And so to identify, she wants to be identified as his, and so sealed, and so put. In his heart, and on his arm, I don't know how to go about putting it on his arm. I don't think that they would be tattooing it on there, surely not, hope not. And there, so, in other words, here is that, and the point goes back once again, the fact that I am my beloved's and his, and he is mine. I am his and he is mine. And so seal me, let me be identified only as yours and yours only, and you be mine too in the process. What about this idea of love? Here's some beautiful expression, love. Strong as death. How so?
Permanent. Permanent.
Permanent. Until what do we part? Until death do we part. Until death do we part. Strong as death. Those words have a great deal of meaning to them, don't they? That's what love, talking about love, and that when the Lord, in fact, when the Lord talked about us loving, it says, be our faithfulness, we'll be faithful unto what?
Death.
Faithful unto death. Our faithfulness is to be unto death. Love, tell me about love without faithfulness. How about that? Not going to work, is it? It's not there. It's one of the integral characteristics of love, if you will. Jealousy. Jealousy is cruel as the grave. Jealousy. So so they said, she said, we're not gonna have any jealousy in our lives, in our relationship, because that is that which destroys. Absolutely tears down to no possible effect. So, have you ever known someone who was jealous toward their mate, and it literally ruined, if not altogether did ruin the marriage? I've known one or two cases in my days where I've observed that. And Brother Bill,
All of those.
do you just stretch it?
Yeah,
If you catch him up there, you bring him on in.
That's a good bit.
Okay, all right. And so jealousy will destroy. Here's something that says, the coals thereof, the coals of love, are coals of fire, which has a most vehement flame. You're talking about a love on fire. How much on fire is it? What goes on, it says in verse 7, what can quench that love? Many waters, can that do it?
No.
You can't quench it. They won't do it. What about floods, which will be parallel? Can they drown it out?
No.
They can't drown it out. What about if someone gives all the substance of his house? He gives everything he has for it. Will that be, that's not going to work either, is it? You ought to condemn. So if you want something in a few words about the nature and the power and the strength of love, here's a few words that gives a pretty good picture of it. She turns her attention now to her little sister. She's young, has no breasts. And questions she asks to her husband, what shall we do with our sister in the day when she shall be spoken for, when she grows up? If she be a wall, interesting expression there, if she be a wall, and what does that have to do with anything?
The wallflower,
Huh?
where the expression wallflower came from.
Wallflower? Well, a wall is something that she built on, isn't it? You know, so that's what they do. We'll build upon her palace of silver. And if she be a door, we'll enclose her with boards of cedar. In other words, the Shunammite woman is concerned about the welfare of her little sister, who also is someday going to grow up, and she wants for her to have what kind of life? Same kind she's had. And so she's going to have to do that. She says in verse 10, I am a wall. And she says, breasts like towers, then was I in his eyes as one that found favor. So her physical appearance certainly had a great deal to do with Solomon's attraction to the Shulamite woman. That wasn't all there was to it, it had something to do with it. And her character, her qualities, everything else was there. And then it talks about Solomon's vineyard and her vineyard here in the last 3 or 4 verses of this great book. Solomon had a vineyard, a place called Baal-Hamon. He let out the vineyard to vine keepers. Everyone for fruit thereof was to bring him 1,000 pieces of silver. So Solomon being the king, having a lot of vineyards, who's going to take care of the vineyards? Well, he lets out the vineyards. He leases them out, if I might say it that way. And so, you know, I go over and I lease a vineyard from Solomon, and I work the vineyard and bring forth the product of it, and I pay him part of the produce. So he gets his cut, and I get mine as a process of it. And then she talks about her vineyard, verse 12. My vineyard, which is mine, is before me, and who and what is that vineyard? Solomon. Solomon is her vineyard. And thou, O Solomon, must have 1,000, and those that keep the fruit thereof 200. And he says, thou that dwellest in the gardens, the companions hearken to thy voice, cause me to hear it. And so Solomon would go in, when he would speak, all those who were around, this is what she says, I want to hear his voice. His absence was not an acceptable thing to her as one whom she loved. She said, make haste, my beloved, and be thou like a roe, be like to a roe, or to a young hart upon the mountains of spices. And so the greatest, you know, the point is they just did not want to be separated at all in the process. They were each other in their will together. Do you have questions or comments? What about your study questions? Are any issues with those before we leave? Let's just look now through those quickly.
I was just, back when we talked about Solomon being ready,
Being what?
being ready.
Yeah, raised?
He was like, he was ready, Solomon being ready when she was describing him.
Uh-huh.
I read a reference back from 1 Samuel 16:12 that David was ready.
Ready. Yeah, I'm not hearing you right now, sister.
Yes, ready.
Ready, okay, that's why, I remember David being said to be ready, yeah. David's ready. And so I guess Solomon inherited some of David's characteristics, right? Seems to be the case.
I have a question on number 27.
Number 27.
The one about the sister, I don't really understand that.
Calling her sister, in chapter 4, 9, 10, 12, chapter, does not mean a biological sister, but an additional, really, closeness is the idea, I think, would be the general thought on it, Brother Keith. My sister, my bride, it's a step beyond, this pulpit concept says, step beyond betrothed, as such, and so, it's a beautiful relationship. What do you think about, think it'd be a good idea, tell me if it's not, you think it'd be a good idea if a young couple about to get married might have an opportunity to study some through the book of the Song of Solomon? Huh? Think that might be helpful too? And seems to me like it would be, process. I don't think we have, well, let's quickly, if you still have your test with you, and I have Keith's, and Keith, you get back row there. And we'll just very quickly go down through that, you can put a question, you can pray through, and then you can get through the after class, and we'll mail them back to you. Caroline? Okay, Phoebe, get your paper out, girl. Not many questions. Number one, this has to do with interpretation. They're more than four, but we talked about four. Which of the four would be the one that we were chosen to follow here? Little. And we accept Solomon to be Solomon, Shulamite woman to be the Shulamite woman. We accept the events in the book to be actual historical events which took place as such. Number two, the Jews read the Song of Solomon when? Passover. It's somewhere that's on the 8th day of the Passover, if they would do that. Number three, what do you consider the most valuable help in studying the Song of Solomon? Just one or two, of course, what you consider, so that's a subjective question, it'd be hard to get it wrong. So, anybody got a suggestion?
The notes were very helpful to me.
No? Okay, good.
Again, it's the divine seal of approval on marriage and husband and wife.
I think that's really a top level one there, Brother Tricia, really good. It's a good thing to remember. It's a love poem, and it's a story of a husband and wife on pure love. That's what it's talking about. Number four, what do you consider the most valuable lesson or lessons learned in the Song of Solomon? And that's the lessons there. I guess the help when we talked about in verse number 3 there. So, number 4, I talked about things, for the lessons there too, is the feelings between a husband and wife. They're God-given, God designed as such, and we ought to uphold them to the highest degree of purity. That's what we ought to do. Enjoy. What about number 5? 3 queens, 4 concubines. Time of the composition. What, earlier or later? Earlier. Number 6. Read or not read the Song of Solomon. Complete at least twice. I asked you to do it 3 times. That's 20 points. Same thing on number 7. I've completed. If you got 100% there, you get 20 points. If you got 80%, you get 80% of 20 points, which is 16. B minus 4. Number 8. A, B, C, D through G. Solomon fell in love with a Shulamite woman who was a keeper of a vineyard. True. The daughters of Jerusalem in Song of Solomon were professional counselors. False. Solomon described his bride as a garden.
True.
The Song of Solomon is a love song, a love poem.
True.
The The Bible says Solomon wrote 105 songs. 1,005, thank you, sir. 1,005. We got 105, so let's go back to math class, Jim. Number F, 1,005. The theme of the book is the love of a man and a woman. True. The canonicity of the book has never been questioned. That's- Put your grade on that and give me your paper, or give me the grade 1 at the end of class, and we're going to stand adjourned. Okay, thank you so much for being in our class, and the book is on the side.